Chapter 8. Heather leaned over and pulled the small curtains that covered the window, and then she shut them. See, as I said, there's a full moon, and I hear them rustling about. Soon they will be banging against the trailer. I think they want me to mate with one of them, she said. Her voice low, and her blue eyes gazing into Justin's brown eyes. It's nothing. You're imagining things. He stood looking around at the neat trailer and a collection of books and the encyclopedias that she referred to earlier. You've been alone out here so long with only your books to keep you company, and reading about werewolves has you imagining things. It's all in your head. All those stories, he said with an even voice. Then he reached and picked up an old paperback with a scary-looking wolf on the cover and placed it next to a vampire novel, Interview with a Vampire. Really? He shook his head and smirked at her before laying it down. I'm not imagining anything. Heather's voice raised from a whisper. Everything sounds strange and menacing when you read stuff like this. And I doubt you will mate with a wolf, or one will want to mate with you. They may want a bite out of you, but you're too skinny for them to enjoy that meal. They love deer meat. Heather protested. They will eat anything. Meat is scarce around here. So is fish and freshwater, ever since the mines were opened up again. But I know where the water is fresh. It comes down from the mountains, and I get it, and when we have an occasional heavy rainfall, I put something out to catch it. But that's not what they want me, she said, rambling on without catching a breath. Justin stared at Heather, not hearing her, and she saw his eyes move around, and she knew that he didn't believe her, and he didn't want to know about anything, unless it was getting out and getting to civilization, where he could get back to that woman he spoke about and dreamed about in the cave. Heather huffed when she thought she couldn't convince Justin of her fears, and walked to a barrel in the corner of the small kitchen, opened the top, and placed a ladle inside and handed it to Justin. He looked up at her, and because he was too thirsty to reject it, he reached for the ladle and placed it to his mouth, then drank the water. This is good. I haven't had fresh water like that since I went hunting with my family. I think I've been in a city too long. It's rainwater. I use it when I run out of the water from the mountains. Maybe the wolves are thirsty and that's why they've come here. Or hungry. No. They can find water. I think they want to mate with me. Did you listen to anything I said? These are not really wolves. They walk on two legs most of the time. I've seen them. They have a large snout, but it resembles a man's nose. Sometimes in the dark I swear they look like naked men. Justin turned his head to hide his laughter. She had described him and his werewolf pack. On their last hunt with his brothers, they would shift, tear off their clothing, and sit around a fire and bark at the moon. It's a wonder you can sleep, and I'm surprised you lasted this long in this wilderness. I know, but I feel better now that you're here. You will stay with me, won't you? Heather didn't know what she was asking, or Justin didn't realize that she wanted him to remain with her. I won't be here for long. I need special food. Heather walked to a small stove and pulled out a tray of dry meat. Looking back at Justin, Heather asked, "Will this be enough for you?" He looked at the preserved meat that had been smoked and reached over and took a slab. Then he chewed it, looking up only to see if there was more. You're hungrier than I thought. The way you're eating, we will have to hunt to keep us until spring. I can't stay that long. I have to find out what happened to your girlfriend. Heather asked, her teeth tightening. She's not my girlfriend. Well, not yet, he said, reaching for a piece of the dried deer meat. Good. Then you can be my boyfriend. Heather sat up, raising her head, proud that she had made an attempt at asking him. I've read about girls my age having a boyfriend, and since I don't have one, would you be my boyfriend? She glanced over to Justin with the innocent eyes of a young girl asking for her first kiss, but in this case, a first love. her blue eyes large and pure yet worldly from living and surviving alone for so long. Justin glared up from his plate at Heather. She sat gazing at him with her lovely blue eyes and dark hair. Her breasts small yet inviting. But she wasn't his idea of a mate. Heather appeared too young and too eager and too needy. He couldn't be what she wanted. He was a werewolf, and she appeared afraid of them. How would she take it if he were to tell her? No. It would be Hannah or nothing for him. Hannah knew all about him, and she understood that her fate had been tied to him, and he could protect her. I can't be a boyfriend. I'm full grown. No. Certainly not. He shook his head and stopped eating. Heather wouldn't take that as a no. She inched closer to him with his hand resting on the back of the small booth until she was under it. Justin raised his hand when Heather came too close. They were sitting in a small confining space, and by Heather being that near, he felt strange. His manhood throbbed. Not even when he had been near Hannah had he felt a shiver of passion course through him the way it felt now. She placed her hand down on his leg. The dormant sexual desires soon awakened in him, and he became breathless. He pushed away from her. It doesn't work that way. I have to want you, and you have to want me. And I'm not attracted to you. Heather didn't take that as a no. She looked at him and placed her hand near his sex and glanced up into his eyes. His wide chest heaving up and down as he breathed loud. His nostrils flaring. But I'm attracted to you. She inched closer, leaning into him, and he smelled her youthful, fresh body. And we're the only ones here, she whispered into his ear. I've read about such things. You're young and I'm young, and there's no one here but me and you. We could be here for years without anyone finding us. Are you going to deny yourself sex? Our bodies are calling for it. My body isn't calling for anything. It was a lie, and Justin knew it. The sweat beaded on his forehead and fell against his cheek, and she wiped it away with her hand. His mouth opened, and she kissed him and let her tongue explore his mouth. He smelled her skin. It was radiating with an odor of a female in heat. He closed his eyes and kissed her back. Chapter 9. Turning her soft skin scraping the stubble of his chin, she said, I like this, as she placed her hand to his face and then taking his large finger and resting it in her mouth. She glanced up at him as she sucked his finger with an up and down motion. With his right finger, he traced the ridges of her natural pink lips. Did you learn that in your books? He questioned with a small smile. His breath rasping and hard as their eyes met with uncontrollable desire. Her hands cupping his throbbing penis. Blinking his eyes, he watched as Heather opened the front of her shirt. Her breasts are beautiful, Justin thought. They were larger than he imagined and full, and her nipples pink and supple. He stared at her, and then something in him drew him to her. Before he realized, he was panting, and his mouth had covered her nipple. She reached for his silky long hair and grabbed a fist of it, directing him as he sucked each nipple. She rose and then pulled down her pants, and then he scrambled to get his jeans off. They were lying on the small seat naked, with their clothes lying at their feet. It was as if something had taken over him, and he was moaning and devouring her with his mouth. Then, to Heather's surprise, he picked her up in his arms. As his eyes locked with hers, he brought her to rest on the bed with him lying over her. Justin's hands moved over her and down between her legs, opening them, roving further down to touch her quivering clit. He looked down at Heather lying with her hips moving, responding to the motion and sensation of his touch. I don't know what's happening to me, he said. I can't control myself, and I have to mate with you. She didn't react to his term of mating. Heather returned the kiss as his hard body lay over her, pressing into her. The heat between them moved through their skins, and his manhood swelled, and her opening became moist. He looked into her eyes, and she didn't reject him. She reached for his penis, and it was hard and erect. She thought nothing of it, but being a virgin might give her pause, but it didn't. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe he didn't care because she didn't care. She wanted to be claimed by this man. He would be her first, and he would be her last because she would never let him go. Heather placed his sex over her small opening, and he pushed and pushed, trying to break through with much effort, because he couldn't stop himself if he had wanted. It was a full moon, and tonight nothing could stay a young werewolf once he found a willing female who was in heat. "You are too small for me," he said, ready to move away if she protested, but she didn't. She held him around his waist, looking up at his broad muscular shoulders, staring into his wanting eyes. "It's because I'm a virgin," she whispered. "Don't stop," she said, breathless. "It will go in soon." "Don't stop trying," Heather whispered, her voice erotic, stirring him and encouraging him on. And Justin didn't stop until he had broken through. Heather let out a gasp and then a quiet moan. She nipped his ear when she thought she couldn't take the pain any longer, but it subsided, and she enjoyed Justin's body. She raised her hips to move against his erection and to help his large manhood open her tight, inviting virginal sheath. He couldn't stop once he became flooded with desire for an orgasm. His body became enthralled with the warmth of her insides, and at that moment he became a slave to Heather's body. Under the control of the full moon, his natural instincts took over his being, and he was able to break past the wall he had put up for everyone except Hannah. By now he had forgotten her, and all he thought about was Heather and how she made him feel for the first time in his young werewolf life. He too was a virgin, and this was his first, and this was her first. And their feelings were mesmerizing to the both of them, and better than they had imagined. Sex was better than food for Justin, and he couldn't stop. He stayed in Heather's body for hours, and she encouraged him on. With his body controlled by the moon and now Heather, Justin would have to fight to break free of her. But did he want to? "I will have to leave you soon. I can't stay here with you. This is not my life," he said after being satisfied for hours on end. His hands tracing the parts from which he found so much pleasure, her nipples, her vagina, her mouth, and her buttocks. When he wasn't in Heather's body, his mind became clear, and he realized where he was, and that's when his mind thought of Hannah. Looking at him surprised at his reaction, Heather said, "Then you will leave me to those wolves who will eventually breach this place and carry me off and mate with me?" What Heather described appeared to be werewolves. But his father said that all the werewolves had disappeared from the North American continent, except for the Alaskan werewolves, and they were coming back because of the serum to make the females fertile. His father and Wilder couldn't be wrong, and they never knew of any werewolf packs this far eastward. And if there were any, they would have come across them by now. Wilder was the head of the Werewolf Council in all of the Americas, and ruled over the European and Asian ones. There were no others except his family, he had declared to the World Council of Werewolves. "I'll have to take you with me." Did he say that? He wondered. What was happening to him? Was sex with a woman so enthralling that he could forget everyone who came before her? The way his body fell into hers, and the feeling of drowning in water and not fighting, had encompassed his being. Is that what love is? Or was it passion? His mother said it was both. She felt both love and passion for his father. He wanted nothing more than to be with Heather, and he would have felt the same way had he had the chance to mate with Hannah. But that wasn't to be. Hannah wasn't there when the moon controlled his body and mind. Every part of him. The moon was there when he lay and felt the inside of Heather, and pressed his manhood against her buttocks. It was only Heather there to give him what he needed, and not Hannah. Justin hadn't planned for this. It was as his father had predicted. It would be the moon that would dictate to him his mate for life. He glanced at Heather and held her close to him and turned to kiss her. Then there came the sound of a loud wolf call and the words, "Heather, come out. It's time." Heather grabbed Justin's shoulder, her nails digging into his skin from fright. She buried her head into his chest. "It's him," she murmured, trembling in Justin's arms.